Okay, so the cylinder is going back on. You need to find the gasket. Again, I want to run with a gasket preferably. So I'm going to compress the spring here by hand. Ring by hand, rather. We're going to make sure this is all lined up. Again, I may need to shorten these. Looks like we're down. Okay, so just gonna test the tightness. Alright, well, it doesn't look like the piston is hitting the top of the cylinder. That's good. Check the squish. Piece of solder. Nice flat land there. Please don't be too tight. Please don't be too tight. Oh, wow. So let's see if I can actually capture this here. What's that big 2.0 right there? Perfect. Boy, I was really worried about that. Wow. I really thought I cut too much off. Okay, very cool. Well, I'm really glad that I either I got lucky or what have you. Proper machining technique, as far as I know, is actually when you bring the cutter down and you want to zero it, the cutter should actually be moving. So you just lightly take a cut and then you can actually zero and then go from there. So maybe I simply got lucky here. So now I got to figure out what's knocking here. The answer is it's nothing in the squish there is good. Let's check it elsewhere as well. Alright, so you check. I'm just checking the back and the front, more or less, of the cylinder, the intake and the exhaust side. Again, let's check this and see. And that's 22 thousandths. So we're not that far off from the front to the back of the cylinder, which is very good. So as long as I can figure out this silly flywheel noise, we'll be all set. Figure out where that's hitting. So next things next, port timings. Let's get the degree wheel out and go from there. So let me just show you what was knocking. Right here on the cylinder is a spot where this binds potentially against the flywheel. So you may actually have to knock that back a little bit with a file, with the grinder, so the flywheel doesn't hit it as it's coming around. When you lower the whole thing, you can get onto a bump there effectively. And you know, the case is a little too tight up against the cylinder as well, so you got to grind on the cylinder, on the case a little bit. It's easiest to do that, certainly when everything's apart. So that said, this is close for right now. Let's take the degree wheel on this and see where we end up. Okay. Again, we got our piston stop. And this is in more or less a kind of an arbitrary kind of a spot. Stop, that's 49 degrees on that side. And that's 59 degrees on this side. So pretty obvious where we need to go here. So we need to go on this side to 49, 59 minus 5 brings us to 54 there. And that's 54 there. And we can tighten up my makeshift degree wheel. That's 54. That's 54. I believe I'm going to make sure the degree wheel is reasonably tight on the crankshaft there. Probably pretty close. Now we get our timings. So, exhaust was opening at 103. I'm seeing light now at 190, 100, 100, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109. That is our new exhaust timing. 109. Transfer ports. I am going to take a guess, and they're likely at 128. 90, 100, 10, 20, 5, 6, 7, 8. 128. Intake. 76. I'm going to average the squish, and I'm going to call it 021. So, we have 109, 128, 76, and 021. Those are our timings. So it sounds to me like we actually have to raise the exhaust port. We have to raise the transfer ports. And then we have to raise... Actually, we might not have to do it very much, if anything, to the intake. So we probably could do something to the intake, but we might not need to. But there you have it for timing numbers when squish is optimized. 109, 128, 76. So we need to go to bottom dead center next, which we're going to do. And then what we can do is put a ring in here and find out exactly where we need to raise the... if I want my intake, my transfer port timing to be 120 and my exhaust timing to be 100, then I can actually put the ring in there, and as I raise this, I'll be able to see exactly where that should be. So let's see if we can do that. I'm going to take the cylinder off and put a ring in there. So I have a ring inside here, and I'm going to reseat this, and I will bring this to where I want my timing to be. So we'll do transfer ports first, and then we'll do exhaust. Alright, we're at bottom dead center here. Okay, so that's seated. Now I'm going to raise the cylinder up to where I want it, which is 120. And 120 is, here's top dead center, here's 90, 100, 110, 120, so it's 60. Now we remove the cylinder. The ring should be up exactly where we need it to be. And the transfer ports, let's see if we can get a good picture of those. Now we know exactly how much we need to grind. There you have that. I'll do the same thing for the exhaust, find out exactly how much I need to grind, and go from there. Battery's almost dead in the camera, but I just wanted to show that I got a business card in there. Actually, my wife's business card, but the business card shows me exactly where I need to grind to. So I'll use that as a guide tomorrow in the office. I'll grind the transfers, and then here I can grind the exhaust myself with that regular old Dremel. So once I get this right, get this all ground out. And oh, by the way, here's another idea. So I've got the exhaust, the plate here, and this thing I'm going to bolt down. These are short bolts. I'm going to bolt this down. I'm going to use this as a guide for how to open the exhaust on this side. So, and then I can actually do the same thing with the gasket, and that way you can modify that as needed, then put this on the muffler and modify that. That way everything's matched. So here's where we're at now. I brought this into the dental office. There. So I've got the transfer ports down there ground out, and they're ground down. They're ground down to, there's a black line in there that I showed how to get with the piston ring and the degree wheel. So I've got another black line in here that I've got to go after. And let's see, you can see that on the exhaust. So hopefully you can see that in the exhaust. There's a black line. That's 105 degrees, I believe. I got to grind down, get that. I'm going to also, the exhaust port's a little too oval, so I'm going to square that off. And on the intake, I'm going to lower that just a touch as well. Right now it's at 76 degrees. I want to get it to 78 or 80, somewhere around there. And then I'll just kind of clean it all up, and then we're going to reassemble it. So I'll show you after I get this all ported. I'll do the this part of the exhaust as well. So there's quite a bit of space here that I can grind from where this heat shield is. And I can actually go beyond that too, and then I can use the heat shield as a template for the exhaust gasket and for the muffler. So I'm going to do some grinding and check back in with you in a little bit. So the cylinder is now ported, and I am not the best at this, but this is what we got in here now. So the idea is And there we go, that's pretty good. The idea here is that you want to more or less you more or less want to square this off. So you don't necessarily want the oval shape, you want more square looking. So that way, as the piston goes up and down, it opens to the full diameter pretty quickly. A little bit of a mound here is okay, because you want the piston to glide smoothly. You need a bevel on this all the way around. I do that with a round diamond. So I'm going to show you exactly how what tools I'm using to do this, and it's pretty simple stuff. Again, a bevel. Here's the exhaust. This is what the exhaust looks like now. And this is not perfect. I mean, this is, for a guy with a Dremel tool, I think I'm doing pretty good. It's not like I've got any really fancy equipment here. So it's not, not perfect, but the timing should be pretty close. So I'm going to stick it back on the saw, see how the timing goes. There you go. So now we can check the timings. Again, not going for super duper accuracy, but up and down here. So let's bring it over to, there's 90, 95, 100. 106. I can actually grind that a tad further, I think. Just see light 105. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to stick with that. We're not going to grind it anymore. That's 90, 100, 105. There's my mark. That's it. Okay, how about the transfer ports? I wanted them at 125. Let's see where we get to. We're about there. 100, 110, 124. Which is okay. That's about 19 degrees of blowdown. That's fine. The timings are good. Check the intake. 77. 77. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to stick with that. That's fine. Again, I can grind that down a bit more, but I'm really not feeling like it at this point. So we have 77 on the intake. You can grind that down to about 80 if you really feel like it. And what I mean by grind down is, so down here, which is the bottom, not the top, the bottom, where the piston just starts to open, if you grind that down a little bit longer, if you grind that down a bit, then the piston will grab more fuel, essentially. Too much, and obviously you have a problem. I'm going to leave that there, actually. So, 77-ish, that's fine. Other thing I'm doing, so you can see it, is that sometimes the case needs modification because the flywheel hits the cylinder, so I've ground that off a little bit. And sometimes the cylinder head itself hits the chassis, so you need to grind on the chassis a bit. And the intake, where the intake boot sits, sometimes, or that it's a baffle, the divider here, you need to grind this area down a little bit too, this little thing here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to dismantle the thing, we're going to put her back together, and you can see the whole process of putting this back together from start to finish.